Okay, so digging deeper. When you talk about questions about the law and you're trying to find the law, there's some things that are helpful to understand, and this is no longer into that secondary source description, but the law itself, things that are helpful to know. It's hard to know what order to put these things in, but the first one that I like to tell people, and this goes back to questions to ask during the reference interview, location, where something takes place matters. The other one I like to bring up with people, because I'm pretty certain you're all comfortable with what federal law covers, what Maryland state law covers, county law, municipal law. This one throws a few people, the whole idea of community bylaws. Anybody live in a community that has covenants or bylaws? Really? Is that an Anne Arundel County thing?
I live in Anne Arundel County, I'm still okay.
Covenants, a lot of people I know live in covenanted communities. It's technically a contract, so it kind of falls under contract law, but bylaws, community bylaws have certain protections and certain ways to resolve things.
And I know of one. My boyfriend in Towson had to sign something that police could act as RAs.
Interesting.
In an apartment complex right next to the university. So they were like
yeah.
Like they released some legal responsibility for parties, essentially.
That's a location. To know, like, well, I'm having this problem in my complex, it would be important to know where the complex is and what sort of things it might be under because of that. We will get questions sometimes about things like placements of sheds and fences and things, or the county might restrict building a shed to a certain distance or location or size even, but your community might restrict it even further, and they are allowed to do that. And so when people call with questions that are at that really minuscule property level, one of the things that we will often ask is, does your community have bylaws? And if so, you need to review them to see what you're restricted to. I got a ticket from this, and it's not an officially issued, government issued ticket, but they can get sanctioned by the community if they break that. It is a valid thing to be held to. So as I said, technically contract as opposed to, but location matters. The next one, this one's fun because this is like basic civics in one slide, right? I like to do the whole, remind me people, I said this morning. Schoolhouse Rock generation, yes. Three-ring circus, everybody remember? Well, most of us remember that. And then they reran it for younger generations, so now it's not a dividing line anymore. Just keep in mind when you get a question about law, number one, keep in mind that people don't ever call it the right thing. So, you'll get people who will call, there's usually multiple words for a lot of this, but they'll call it the wrong thing and think you understand what they mean. But if you try to break it down from what they're asking for into the three branches of government and the kinds of law each branch makes and who makes it, that will often tell you where to go for that bit of information. I do suggest that if it's not really obvious from the question which branch to start with, don't aim for the primary source immediately. Go secondary first to confirm. So if somebody calls and says, I want the statutory law on, and I won't be able to come up with the subject right now, but on a particular subject, if you think, I don't know if that really sounds like something they would do in the Maryland Code, if you're not sure, don't run to the code and look, or if you run to the code and don't find it, at the next step, instead of going to, say, regulations or something, go to a secondary source where they discuss the issue and then cite you to the location in the code regulations, which are COMAR. Do you guys have COMAR here in print? Strong people. Yeah, fun. I know, I keep saying here, but I mean in your home. And then the Constitution is at the basis of all of that. So if you're not really certain that your grounding in civics is as strong as perhaps it should be, then there is more information on our site, and there's a lot of places like the Library of Congress has some beautiful, and I'm not talking down, but like Government for Kids, so much easier to understand than high level. I mean, I really like the little pictures of the three-ring circus and the lion. Yeah, it's just easier to pull it in. So make sure that you understand the system so that you can put it into one of them. And if you can't, go to those secondary descriptive resources, and then that will help redirect you. All right. So where to find the law? If you do know which branch you want to look for and you do not have access to the print versions, I'm a big fan of print versions for law because sometimes it's just easier to flip the pages like this than to get yourself lost in this stream of online. But This part of our website, so on our homepage there's a link right in the center that says Gateway to Maryland Law, which brings you to this page here. And we've collected links for free, reliable, web-based sources for primary law. So statutory law, which is the Maryland Code, and court rules, which are written by the judiciary, are linked in here. These are free versions that are made available to everybody. Maryland case law, we have links to the various places where you can find things about cases, if somebody wants the text of one. And this is Maryland-based, again. This whole training is very Maryland-based, but there are equivalent things at other levels, obviously. And then below that, you'll see links to COMAR, which is our regulations. I can't fit it all into one page. And then we have links where we've compiled all of the digital versions of county codes and municipal codes. Anything that we can put our little pointers on, we've gathered a page of links to county codes and a page of links to municipal codes. So if somebody calls and you are in Worcester County and somebody wants to see something that's in Wicomico's county code and you don't happen to have that because, you know, it's not your county, there's online versions available. And a lot of the counties actually publish them originally in digital format. Now they don't even put them out in print anymore. So we're trying to keep snapshots of them in time. So if somebody ever calls and says, but I want to know what it looked like 2 years ago, we might actually be able to help you with that. So can your local county office of law, FYI. They usually keep the old ones too. Any questions about where to find it? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the court system a bit. And keep in mind that court systems exist at all levels, and that location, not all. Federal and state levels both have court systems. And there are additional adjudicatory bodies outside of the particular judiciary branch of government. In Maryland, this is basically a picture of our court system. So you have the Court of Appeals, which is our highest court, our equivalent of a Supreme Court, Court of Special Appeals, which is the intermediate appellate court. Most of the questions that you get are not going to be related to appellate courts at all. It's rare. Once people hit the appellate level, they're usually talking to us already anyway. Or they have an attorney, which we strongly recommend for people at the appellate level, but whatever, there's an awful lot of pro se's. We're supposed to call them SRLs now. Self-represented litigant, as opposed to pro se, which means for self. Then below that, you have trial courts. So the ones that look a little more like what you see on TV, where there's a judge and there's people arguing for both sides, and so on and so forth. In Maryland, we have 2 trial level courts. Most states have 1. We have the district court and we have the circuit court. And for the circuit court, there's 1 in every county. And for the district court, it just depends on the population levels for how many locations they will have in any given county. District court is managed on a statewide level. So you can contact pretty much any district court. They will have access to mostly the same information. So if somebody's got questions about their case or the schedule, or they want to know who to talk to, you can contact any district court and they should be able to essentially connect that same information. Circuit court, on the other hand, is administered on a county by county level. So you will often need to know which county they are in if you need to connect them with circuit court. And I say this even though I know you work in a county, because I mean, people cross county lines all the time. So my husband practices law and he shows up in court in 3 different counties, because it's not like a county line is like must need passport, have to cross, you know, we're always going across. And an awful lot of people get speeding tickets in Worcester County. So
so are you saying that someone can go to a different county than the place they got the ticket to deal with it?
They can call any district court if they have a question about the status of their case or anything scheduling coming up with their case. If it's a district court matter, everybody has access to the same schedule information.
So they've got the data, but you're still limited to your...
They'll still have to show up in the local court in which they're supposed to show up. Okay. Yeah. Had a lovely patron who was calling from New Jersey a couple years ago, got a speeding ticket in Worcester County, decided that he could not be bothered to drive back down. It was a must appear because he was driving really, really fast, and his license had expired. And he's in another state. Not a lot of brain power. Well, you know, he wanted to go on vacation. And I know, because I had a whole conversation with him on the phone, that he came down to go on vacation on an unexpired driver's license and then drove too fast. So, and he had he had a must appear, didn't show up, so he got a FTA, failure to appear. So they had a warrant out for his arrest. So he calls, because they've been calling. Apparently they put some kind of it went to his New Jersey record. So now he can't get his license renewed in New Jersey because he's got a warrant out in Maryland. Well, how do I fix this? They said, well, you have to come down to Maryland and fix it. Well, I'm not doing that. And actually, he was quite mean, and I had to go home and have my husband pour me red wine. And anyway, it was not a pleasant, but it made me think about what people think about where they have to show up. You cannot resolve this in New Jersey if you messed up in Maryland. You cannot resolve it in, Anne Arundel County if you messed up in Worcester County. You have to go down and fix it. So try to keep in mind just the basic divisions in what is here. So often it's easier to point somebody to help if you know where their particular situation is happening. So if they've got a traffic issue, district court handles traffic issues. I don't have a lot of resources to offer for that, though. What I really want is a helpline for traffic questions. Yeah, I'm sorry, there isn't one. I wish.
Those are like the most common things.
I know.
Gets tickets.
I know, but you can't even call the self-help center for that because they don't deal with, unless it becomes an arrest. No, you still can't call the self-help center for that. Yeah, I can read them the sections for their citations and explain to them that.
So to be clear, when you get a citation, it comes with a number that we could type in somewhere and it'll pop up the law? Or is it not that easy?
It's not that easy,
Of course it's
but
not.
but every citation lists on it the law that was violated. It's just in kind of a shorthand form. So if, like us, you see them all the time, you can look and go, yeah, that's transportation article section this, and we can tell where it is. So, and I can show you, I'm happy to show you how that works. There are a few that are a little odd, and there are some federal traffic citations people will call with sometimes. Anyway, traffic, landlord, tenant, and small claims, probably where you get a lot of questions. You get small claims case questions ever? Hey, I want to sue the guy because he broke my fence. Some. Landlord, tenant, definitely, we've had that discussion. That all happens in district court. So not only the court self-help center, but there are actually district court self-help centers that have walk-in places. There's one in Salisbury, I believe, double check me, but it allows people to get actual face-to-face assistance for these things. And then anything that's family law, that's the critical one, is in circuit court. So circuit court family law self-help centers, or the big Maryland self-help center, are where they can get legal assistance, no money involved. Very important. And anything that does anybody ever call about probate of wills? Ever? That's an orphans court. Generally, you can't really call the orphans court because they don't really have but the Register of Wills office can be somewhat helpful. So that's sort of a breakdown of the court system to help direct you. All of this is like, the more you know about it, the better you'll be able to say, out of all these resources, this might work for this particular question. Questions about forms. See, I said we'd come around to the forms. The one statement I really hate making, but is very true, there are very few standard fill-in-the-blank Maryland court forms. Apparently in Florida there's a form for everything, so they call and say, well, in Florida we have. Like, okay, we don't. If there are standard forms for something that's a court action, they will be on the court's website. Generally, you will find forms for most district court actions. So any small claims, landlord, tenant, if you've got somebody calling their landlord, their tenant's driving them absolutely crazy, has done everything wrong, and they want to boot them and they want to know how to get their property back, that's a district court. Check out the forms for your possibilities. If you have somebody who has a problem with no heat in the winter and they want to do this rent escrow thing, they're like, I've read there's this thing where I don't have to pay my rent to the landlord and I can pay it to the court instead, and they'll wait and fix it and whatever, then that's rent escrow, and there are forms for that on the district court, on the MD court site for district court. Family law has 1 million forms available. So if it's any kind of a family law action, divorce, child custody, modification of child custody, child visitation, modification of visitation, all of that stuff, they've got forms for that, and guardianship on it. So those are things that I can lay out, and I know those exist. But beyond those, you're talking what we call unrestricted, and whether they are filed with the court, like court action forms, or not filed with the court, like a lease, which only ever shows up in court if there's a problem with it, or a will, which only ever shows up in court if somebody contests it. There isn't a standard for most of them. So instead, you need to see, to some extent, if it goes into court, the Maryland rules that tell you how things get formatted, and then write it out. And then look for sample forms books or sample forms online, and there aren't many of those, for examples and guidance. The big thing with the forms books is the only place that really keeps up on them are law libraries. There are a couple we have that we love that if you ever have, a little extra money in your budget, we could recommend to you to add to your collections if you get that level of question. But we have tons. So that's why I'm always like, when in doubt. And the caveat, you can suggest sources for them to look at, and if they've given you the name or number of a form, you can provide them with the form, but you can't direct them and say, this is the form you need. That's advice. All right. Any questions about, oh, wait, I said I had a thing. That's the flow chart for finding forms. It does not cover all possibilities, but it's kind of intended to show you that there are things you can find on the MD Court site, and I've just run through a bunch, and you're going, I'm never going to remember that. So this particular picture should be on the website. If it's not, it will be soon. So start with, is it a court action or matter? No. Is it a power of attorney form? Yes. Statutory form and MD code. Now, this one's linked to Contact a Law Library, but I believe if we look on the People site, and we can do this in a sec, there's a link that'll tell you where the power of attorney form. It's the Estates and Trusts article title.
Yeah, I'm on the People's Law Library.
It's in the teens.
Page right now.
It was like 16801 or something, but I'm probably blowing that number. There's an actual statutory form they're supposed to start with. And then if it's not a power of attorney, there are books and databases, and there are places we can point you to. And sometimes if it's something that we have a sample for and you don't, we're happy to send you things. There's obviously a limit. If you say, hey, we need these 50 pages of whatever, or 3 chapters of this text, you won't need this. I'm pretty certain that none of you would ask us for something that we would not want to be. If you call and say, we need this little form, we think it's in a book, it's probably not any more than 5 pages or 8 pages or whatever, we'll send it to you, and then you can make your person happy, and they don't have to travel to Annapolis and show up in front of us. But it's fine. We're happy to do that. It's just, we're also happy to make you guys look even better than, I don't know that that's possible. You guys already look really good. So it's just supposed to kind of lead you, generally speaking, to help you, because the forms thing can be kind of intimidating. So in addition to that, to help you, this is the best places to look for forms to start with. The mdcourts.gov court forms site is where they put all of the official court, all the ones that the court actually issues are there. The Maryland People's Law Library itself does not necessarily have forms, but in that How Do I block, they have Find Court and Legal Forms that breaks down a lot of different kinds of forms and where you can find them. So it's a finding tool to help guide you to resources for forms. And I put this on here because there are some systems in the state that have Gale legal forms. I do not believe that the ESRL does actually have access to that. That can be helpful too. We do have it, so if it's a particularly weird sounding form, give us a call, because that database is really good for examples of very bizarre sounding forms.
And other things.
And other things. It's
letters from Santa.
The legal forms database?
Yes.
Oh, I'm looking that up.
Or at least it used to, because when we did have it, I remember looking for it because it has letters. And so I was like, and there are like letters if you got bad service, like, so you could sort of
sue Santa?
No,
you can't
not to sue Santa. No, that was you need a letter from Santa to give to a kid. But there were also ones about like complaints, like you had bad service somewhere and you want like a form letter to fill out and then send off and stuff. It has all kinds of interesting,
really good stuff.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
What's not listed here, but I would point out, is that NOLO, in almost every topical book they put out, if there are forms attached to that topic or related to that topic, they will usually include some kind of a sample or information about how you might format something. So they'll have like sample letters to your neighbor if they won't cut their tree limbs back that will say, please do so, or these are the consequences. They actually help people draft things because they provide sample language. So we love NOLO, lots. We actually have the database for NOLO, which is basically all of their books, only in a database format, so I can like pull clips from 2 different books and not have to type out paragraphs, which makes me really happy when I'm doing email reference.